Hello and welcome to another Bones V Kickstarter review. This is the 10th group of add-ons I managed to pick up, and as the title suggests, we'll be looking at the Henchmen and Hirelings add-on, the Henchwomen power-up, and the Beastmen power-up. Only the Henchmen are still in the PM, but all of these add-ons are currently on their way to retail release. If you're interested in acquiring them or any other Kickstarter item, scan the QR code at the end of the video or visit pm.reapermini.com or reapermini.com for more information. If this is your first time seeing a review in this series, I have many more deep dives on my channel for you to check out. But you can get to them quicker by clicking the card in the corner of the video or by checking out the links in the description. Alright, now without further ado, on with the review. Our first add-on is the Beastmen power-up, although I will actually point out that this is two add-ons in one. For whatever reason, probably just to make it easier on the back end, Reaper combined the Beastmen and Ratmen into the Beastmen add-on. For retail, they've already released the promo images, and it seems that they'll be coming in two separate packages, sold collectively, not individually. But first up, I'm going to show off the Wererats. Now these are all recasts of previous Bones releases, which might be why these were all bundled in. On that front, if you already had these, you might not have been super interested in this add-on, and waiting for retail may actually have been the better move in this instance. But that's neither here nor there. I didn't have these though, so it all works out for me. These Wererats could actually make for some great Skaven if you're doing something Warhammer related, and I suppose that goes for the Beastmen too. I've been consistently impressed by this Bones Black material, as well as the Bones USA material. You can really see the strides Reaper has made in capturing detail and in ensuring quality in their upgraded materials. I haven't said too much about these individual figures, but I actually do really like all of them, although they're kind of forgettable in the sense that there's just other figures that I care more about. That said though, I still think they're all really cool. My favorite has to be the big guy with the giant, I guess, bone blade thing. Very threatening figure, very scary. Wouldn't want to deal with him. Now for the Beastfolk. These fit that typical goat folk, but not quite satyr, but similar sort of vibe. They're very much like some of Reaper's older Beastfolk figures, 3 of which I happen to have painted up here. Coincidentally, those are some of my most favorite figures that I've ever painted. Anyway, these figures are not recast as far as I can tell, and the sculpts are all quite nice and share roughly the same oval base between them. I like all the weapons and shields these folks are carrying. They all look hastily put together for practicality and intimidation in mind. And one of these Beastfolk seems to have been intended to be female, and that's some nice variety that we're getting. If you wanted to somehow fashion a player character or an NPC out of these figures, then you'll have gotten just a little bit more in terms of options. The dual-wielding fighter has a pretty warped blade, unfortunately, but I can deal with that later. The sculpt looks great at any rate. Definitely doesn't look like a friendly sort of chap, and gives the vibes that it could be a leader or maybe a high-ranking warrior of some sort. But the real star of this collection is the shaman here. Wow, remember what I was saying about detail earlier? In addition to adding a nice spellcasting component to what otherwise would have just been a melee focused group, this figure is just packed with detail and story and character. The creature itself looks great. I love that he's a bit stockier than the rest and has those massive curling horns. But it's the deer skull that really steals the show here. The whole thing is covered in this fine, beautiful etching. I can make out other Beastfolk holding weapons, what looks like some plants or stars, and plenty of other little details and runes that I was not expecting to see from looking at the render images at all. This is really one of those minis that you have to see in person, and ideally under a great deal of magnification. These are figures I definitely keep my eyes on, and since they're heading to retail soon, we shouldn't have to keep an eye out for too long. I'll give this add-on a 10.8 out of 12. Our next add-ons were separated during the Kickstarter, but will be released together as a single box set once they hit retail. Kind of the reverse of the previous add-on. The first part is the Henchmen and Hirelings add-on, which is currently still in the PM, seemingly as is. The price did go up, but only to $15, but it doesn't look like they bundled the second part, and that seems like a bit of an odd decision to me, but oh well. Anyways, these would represent classic types of NPCs that your party could recruit to aid them on their mission. We'll start things off with the 10-foot pole bearer. In case you didn't know, the pole this guy is carrying is actually something you can pick in your starting equipment, at least if you're using typical 5e sheets. But I doubt that's something a lot of players gravitate towards. And that's where this guy comes in. I suppose you could modify this guy into being a pikeman, but the pole already has its uses. The primary use is to set off traps at a distance or test areas ahead of the party without being in direct harm. And going off the typical 28mm scale grid, this pole is actually equivalent to 10 feet as it is currently held. So you'll be able to visually represent this use on the table, which is really great. Other than that, I suppose you could have him poke and prod certain foes away from the party, and if your party finds themselves trapped on a convenient series of boulders at risk of being eaten by giant worms, you could always borrow the pole for a bit of vaulting. Be careful though, because this figure is, unsurprisingly, a very strong candidate for breakage on the pole there. That's the last thing you'd want to happen during that scenario. Next, we have the Lantern Bearer. Gee, wonder what he does. He's actually a really great looking character that would take point on your darker excursions. I love the hand on the hilt here. It really shows that this character will be ready for action, and he's one of several opportunities to practice painting OSL from this collection. Here we have the Scout. This reminds me of Schumacher from the Gallo Guard set, except with a bow and not a giant sword. Great to see a return of the hip quiver here, and just the sheer amount of extra kit on these really sells the idea that these guys are prepared, or at least seem to be. Also, this fellow has a really nice hat. And then there is the Porter. This is the poor fellow who you make carry all your stuff when you're dealing with a game that considers carry weight. Personally, I've never cared for that part of the game, so unless it's obviously too heavy to lug around, I don't really worry about it. It also helps to throw a bag of holding or two at your players to just really skirt the whole issue entirely. Still, this guy could be of some use in transporting loot that maybe wouldn't fit in those vessels, or hey, maybe this guy could just be a very busy shopper or important character heading through the market in need of some help carrying his goods. It's a good opportunity for your players to be good Samaritans. Or thieves, I don't know. It's up to them. This here is the Man-at-Arms. This is just an all-around nice-looking mercenary. This would also make for a great guard or any sort of melee-focused combat class for PCs or NPCs. I really like the chainmail and the helmet on this guy. The only thing about him that strikes me as odd, though, is the placement of that dagger or short sword under his cloak there. It just seems a little out of place. Like, what is it even attached to? But I digress. This figure looks great and may be the most generally usable out of the whole lot. Next up, the Oil Thrower. He's a guy who throws oil and potentially sets it on fire. I mean, unless you're using this guy as a rioter or something, that's a very specific and dangerous task that I hope is being performed by a professional. Not just in terms of someone who is getting paid to do the thing, but someone who knows what they're doing. I'd be wary of using this character, but even if, or when, something goes wrong, it could lead to some fun, ridiculous moments, and that sounds pretty worth it to me. This is just a wizard for hire. He's another one of those figures that you or your players could choose for their own characters. I like the big pointy hat and the long robes, but my favorite part is the book that he's reading. With him pointing at the page, it seems to me like he knows what he's doing, but he needs to check his notes. Maybe he's not entirely sure of what he's casting. I think that just builds a foundation for a very fun character, hireling or otherwise. And finally we have the map maker, aka the cartographer. I love the little dungeon squares on this unfurled map here. I think it being blank would have been better for freehand art, but I reckon not all of us are into that, and this is just a fun little detail. If your party is hired to visit an uncharted area or wants to hire a guide to help them navigate the seas or some other part of the world, this is definitely a really neat hireling to pick up, though I can't imagine he'll be much help in combat. With that, we've seen everything from this add-on. A really great, useful selection, I think, so I'm going to have to give this a 10.9 out of 12. Next, we have the Henchwomen set. This was a power-up added after the campaign concluded. As I've previously mentioned, it is now being bundled in with the rest of the figures into a single Henchmen and Hirelings box set. A good move, I think, as there's really no need to divide these up as they were going forward. Anyways, as you can see, one of these is still in the bag. This is the porter with cart, but there's actually 2 porters and no cart. Yeah, somehow I found myself being sent 2 of the porters and no cart, save for the wheel and the base. Don't really know how that happened, but as funny as that is, it means I can't really do much with this character. Hold up, it's me from the future, or my future, your past. I just got home recently and found this little package waiting for me. This contains the replacements for the missing or damaged items I got from the Kickstarter. I only had 2 of those, unless you count the bucket from the Brian One extras. I didn't really realize it was missing that. If you recall the core set video, one of the Brierlings was quite noticeably missing its head. Well, I got my replacement of that too. Though unfortunately I sent them the wrong Brierling ID, so I actually just ended up getting a duplicate of the one I did have. Kind of conflicted on whether or not to reach back out to them to say, oops, I asked for the wrong thing, you did everything correct, I messed up, can you please send me another mini for free? I guess I'm just going to have to chalk this up as a loss. I mean, I guess I could take the head off and put it on the other Brierling, it'd probably fit just fine. But anyways, the porter with the cart. I got my cart, an extra wheel, and an extra base, so I was able to fully assemble my porter with cart. Assembling this cart was actually pretty tricky. The cart has the porter's hands molded onto it, and you have to stick them up her sleeves. And then there's the wheel, which has this peg that has to be glued down, and then you have to snap the cart hooks over the spokes that are in the wheel. It has a lot of moving parts that if you glue it wrong, you can really mess up and get things at the wrong angles. On the retail preview image, it seems fully assembled already though, so you may not have to worry about what I had to worry about. If you're buying it at retail, anyways. Well, now I can actually talk about this mini since I actually have one assembled. I think this porter has a better idea than the other one who was just lugging things over his shoulder. Terrible on his back. Granted, this cart may be a bit less maneuverable in some environments, but at the same time, it's a lot easier to drop a cart and run than it is to take off everything that the other guy had strapped to his body. Looking at the figures we do have ready to go, first up, the Arbalist, or Crossbowman. It's another very well kitted up hireling. This lady looks like she's no stranger to combat. I really like the position of the crossbow and the bolt case. The shield and sword she's carrying are nice too, though I don't know how easy it would be to fetch them from where they are if need be. Like the man-at-arms, this is yet another figure that would make a good hireling as much as it would a player character mini. This one is listed as the Link Girl. Now, I don't know what that means, but I would assume she functions like a torch bearer given the torch being bared and the bundle of torches peeking out from under her cloak. I wonder if her and the oil thrower would get along, or if she would see him merely as a walking safety hazard. Next, we have another lantern bearer, this one holding it out on a stick. That's potentially a lot more useful and safe depending on the environment. This is another one of those figures where keeping it secure is important, as this pole or the lantern at the end could easily break off under the right circumstances. And finally, my favorite mini from this entire video, this is the Woman at Arms. I love this sculpt. We don't get a lot of figures with this sort of body shape in miniatures, and it's great to see one that is so well done and could be used to inspire a great PC or NPC. I just love the design here. The shield, the mace, the hair, the helmet, the outfit, it's all wonderful. I know she's just a mercenary, but this has easily become one of my favorite miniatures from the entire campaign. And on that high note, I'm going to give this set a 10.6 out of 12. Knocked down mostly due to the issues with the porter, but raised up due to all the quality sculpts you can see. I definitely keep an eye on the Henchmen and Hirelings box set once it hits retail to get your hands on these minis. And with that, we've done it. This was the penultimate review of the add-ons I picked up from this Kickstarter. In the meantime, let me know what you thought of these add-ons in the comments down below. Did you spot a favorite mini? I think you know mine, but which is yours? And are you planning on picking any of these up? If you are, you're going to want to head to reapermini.com to pick up the ones at retail, and pm.reapermini.com for more info on what the rest of the Kickstarter still has to offer. If you found this video enjoyable, helpful, or some other adjective, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'm really proud of the content I've been making, especially being a novice such as I am. And seeing your support has really meant a lot. Alrighty, I'll see you a lot in the next video. Thanks again for watching. Have a good one, and let's go paint some minis.